Hey guys, another one take review and the 10th part in my Rock Hall review series where I review one album by each of the current year's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. Today, I am talking about one of what is, in my opinion, one of the most overrated bands of all time, Rage Against the Machine, and more specifically, their self-titled debut album. Before I start this review, I do want to point out the fact that this band's just never really clicked with me. I've constantly retried revisiting them, and outside of a couple tracks, like, say, Guerrilla Radio, they've just never really stuck with me as a band that I've enjoyed, even slightly for the most part at least. And I've never really understood the love for their discography, but I've especially never understood the legendary status of this album in particular. One of the biggest reasons why I've never been able to really get into Rage Against the Machine is because of frontman Zach De La Rocha. I've kind of found him not so much terrible as a rap rock performer, but just more so mildly annoying. I mean, you've got songs like Township Rebellion, or even the kind of classic that is Bomb Track, that go between average and mediocre performance to slightly obnoxious and at the same time almost unpleasant because of that. It's not the sort of fun obnoxious that you would maybe expect from a band like this. There are even times where he just becomes woefully over the top with how he performs. Songs like Wake Up try to be really anthemic with the overall instrumentals and the overall vibe that they deliver, but Zach De La Rocha's fairly unlikable personality behind the mic just kind of ruins it all, and I truly do not understand what separates the kind of legendary Zach De La Rocha from someone much more hated, like, say, Fred Durst. And I know that might be a bold statement to some people out there, but I just think both are on equally horrible grounds as just obnoxious and largely unlikable performers that weigh down an otherwise reasonably talented-ish backing band. Now, while may find Rage Against the Machine's vocalist to be nothing more than just painfully overrated, I will just outright say that I straight up dislike guitarist Tom Morello. There's no getting around it. I just cannot stand Tom Morello as a performer. How he's made his career making music off of the same exact trick of just abusing his whammy pedal to the point that it's probably dead by the end of the album. I don't understand. It's just the same thing over and over, and it's cool at first, like any effects pedal, but when you're constantly reusing it, it gets stale by the halfway point of this album, and this album's over 50 minutes long, so by the time it wraps up with the song Freedom, it's completely just, I'm completely disenchanted with it, I guess you could say. It gets old quick, and, I mean, he's probably influenced more people and made more money than most people will ever make in their entire lives with what he's done with Rage Against the Machine alone, what he did with this album alone. And I won't deny Tom Morello's importance in music history. He's certainly a very important guitarist. With that being said, I cannot stand his style. I think he's a one-trick pony, at least on this album, and really the majority of Rage Against the Machine's career, because really he does a lot of the exact same stuff on the Battle for Los Angeles and Evil Empire, and I'm just not a Tom Morello fan, to say the least. Rounding out Rage Against the Machine are bassist Tim Commerford as well as drummer Brad Wilk. Tim Commerford is a fantastic bassist, in my opinion. He's even though I don't like Rage Against the Machine, I think he actually might be one of my favorite bassists. And Brad Wilk is a solid drummer, and even with the flack that he's gotten over the years for performance style and, maybe falling out of rhythm a little bit on occasion, even in studio, I do think that he is a solid drummer that really provides a strong backbone to the band overall. And I mean, Take the Power Back is just an example of a song that really could have been boring or dry, and it's still not great, but at least some good funky bass lines and solid drumming work kind of ensure that they aren't totally dry of amusement and entertainment at the very least. With that being said, even though they saved this album from being a total disaster and a total bore fest, it doesn't save the album and make it good either. It's just a one small redeeming quality of the band here, in my opinion. Now, one of my biggest pet peeves, I guess you could say, about Rage Against the Machine is their politics, and I won't get into that too much, but I just will say I don't mind music with politics. I love the Dead Kennedys. I've talked about Fela Kuti earlier in the series. Later on in the series, I'll be talking about the MC5. I have no problem with it. Other artists like Public Enemy, again, love them, no problem with it whatsoever. But the thing is, they all had different levels of legitimacy behind what they were saying. There's just a major era of industry sort of surrounding Rage Against the Machine's self-titled record, and I mean Rage Against the Machine as a whole, to be honest. And by that, I mean that Rage Against the Machine almost feel like they were tailor-made to pander towards a younger, rebellious, supposedly politically radical group of the younger generation of the time period without actually backing up any of the things that they're saying. I mean, you've got songs like Killing in the Name that are just the worst of the worst of faux political rock music. And some songs like Bullet in the Head kind of work to some extent, work well enough for what they are, but there's still no denying that there's a sense of sort of plasticness that kind of covers it all up. It really doesn't feel very legitimate overall, and it does very much, in my opinion, take away from the experience of the album. So, in conclusion, overall, Rage Against the Machine has never done a lot for me as a band. Musically, I just can't find myself to be too interested in them. There's a part of me that genuinely wants to like them and like this album, but as I revisit it, I still think the instrumentals are mediocre. I still think that Zach De La Rocha is one of the most irritating vocalists, or at least mildly annoying vocalists to ever grace rap rock. I still think that Tom Morello runs out of interesting things to say on his guitar, like 3 or 4 songs into the album, and I just think it's not very fun listen overall. And I mean, if you're going to make an album that's just filled with kind of faux politics, at least make it a fun one. But they can't even achieve that. It's just a very boring, unenjoyable album, in my opinion. And I wouldn't have revisited it if it weren't for the series, because I find that I have the exact same opinions about it since I listened to it for the first time a year or two ago now. I'm gonna give this album 2.5 stars out of 5. There's much worse rap rock out there, like Limp Bizkit, of course, but there's also much better rap rock out there. Not a lot of better rap rock, because rap rock is, generally speaking, not a great genre historically, but at the same time, when you have options like early Red Hot Chili Peppers, why would he take this? I mean, I know a lot of people would, but I just don't understand. So, yeah, 2.5 stars out of 5. Now that's usually the part where I sign off, and then I just say see you guys in the next one. But this is my Rock Hall review series, so this is the part where I talk about does this band deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Will they get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, etc. And as far as deserving goes, absolutely, Rage Against the Machine. As much as I'm not a fan of them, deserve a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They are arguably the defining rap rock band. Take that for what it is, because, like I said, rap rock is not the most beloved of genres, but they're the defining band of the genre, maybe one of the defining just rock bands of the 90s in general, really. I mean, you could argue that they're probably the most successful political or politics related rock band of all time. And besides that, Zach De La Rocha and Tom Morello, while I may not be big fans of them, are kind of two iconic musicians of their respective instruments, the voice and guitar. And Tim Comerford and Brad Wilk, while not nearly as famous in the mainstream eye, still have a lot of respect from their peers I've seen over time, and I think that they do absolutely deserve a place. Now, as for will they get in, it's difficult, and there are a lot of factors that play into will they get in. And I think that Rage Against the Machine are actually one of the most interesting examples of this, because on one hand, they've been nominated multiple times now. I believe the first time they were nominated was their first year of eligibility in 2018, and this is their third time being nominated now in 2022. And they still haven't gotten in yet, which I think a lot of people were shocked. It was either 18 or 19. I could be mistaken, but I believe it was 18 or 19. It might have been 19. But either which way, my point is, them and Radiohead got nominated in the same year for first year eligibility. Neither of them got in. Everyone was shocked. Radiohead got in the following year, which everyone kind of expected to happen the year prior, but I think everyone was expecting Rage Against the Machine to follow suit and be the next inducted act from that year of first year eligibles that everyone thought was going to get in, and then they didn't get back in. They didn't even get nominated the following year, I don't think. They just were not brought back. And I think everyone was kind of shocked, and I was kind of shocked too when that happened, because if I'm not mistaken, I think that Tom Morello is on the nomination committee, and I don't know if that's him either purposefully not getting his own band nominated so that other older, more influential, deserving acts, or even just his peers that are maybe a little more deserving, like say maybe Soundgarden, get nominated. If that's the case, I have the utmost respect for that, but I highly doubt that. And I just feel like it's a case of maybe the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination committee being just a little bit older than the generation that really appreciates Rage Against the Machine to the fullest extent. But as more rock and hard rock artists and more recent artists, well, I can't say recent, late 80s artists and early 90s artists get inducted, I think Rage Against the Machine has more and more of a chance, and I do think this could be their year. I could be wrong. It's a stacked ballot this year. I think genuinely, with wholeheartedly think that every artist that's on the ballot this year has a really good shot, if I'm being honest. But at the same time, I think Rage Against the Machine, having been nominated a third time, I don't know why, but I've just got a funny feeling that third time's the charm. I could be totally wrong, though. Of course, politics are something that have always pushed the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame away as well. There's examples like I mentioned before, the Dead Kennedys, among other bands that just were kind of iffy. Even some bands that weren't very political. Oh, I should say the Dead Kennedys have never even been nominated. But anyways, besides that point, other bands that weren't even like 24/7 political, like say the Sex Pistols. You could argue that the Pistols only were really super political like half the time, maybe with Anarchy in the UK and God Save the Queen and whatnot, but they still took a number of nominations to get in. My point is that political music doesn't always fare well at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Even last year, when Fela Kuti got nominated, you could argue that he's maybe the most political figure that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame have ever nominated, and he didn't get in last year, unfortunately. I did a video about him before, about his album Zombie, but again, that just further drives home the point. Politics and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame seem to often not mix too well. But I don't know. I think that Rage Against the Machine do have the mainstream appeal as well as the rock purist appeal that people who say that, the hip hop doesn't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, pop doesn't belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, blues doesn't, blah, 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 will be pleased, and at the same time, they could headline the ceremony if they really wanted to, if they didn't have a bigger name on the ballot, or inductee list, I should say, that year. So overall, while I won't say for sure, I do think that they have a slightly higher chance than the 2 years prior. I think this could be their year of Rage Against the Machine, and if they get inducted, although I'm not a fan, I will be fairly happy with that. Not in the sense that I like them, but in the sense that they absolutely deserve it, and it is fairly overdue. So with that being said, I've given Rage Against the Machine's self-titled album 2.5 stars out of 5. Not a fan of the band. They just don't click with me. I think there are bands similar that were just much better. Instrumentals here are just kind of boring to me. I think Zach De La Rocha and Tom Morello especially are just offenders of just uninteresting performance styles that can even become mildly annoying as time goes on, as the record goes on. And overall, it's just not my thing, I guess, is what you could say. It's just not my thing, and I do understand why so many love it, but I'm not one of those people. So yeah, 2.5 stars out of 5, and the band deserved to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I think maybe this year they will. So yeah, 2.5 stars. Anyways, with that being said, that is the end of this entry in the Rock Hall Review series. Join me next time where I talk about one of the Godfather bands of punk, the MC5, and more specifically, the only album that anyone knows by the MC5, Kick Out the Jams. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one.